I got to get to some viewer questions. This thing's lighting up. Lorraine, you're new to this conversation. Thank you for joining us today. She writes, I appreciate the description of senior leaders. I am struggling to understand how to manage staff where individuals need to engage and work differently. The accommodations are usually seen as perks. Yeah, bingo. Right on the money, Lorraine. Thank you. To that point, I think and Fran and Mark, who's not here, but the three of us, when we've had these conversations, they usually often start with venue.
Yeah.
And then the people who are going to the various venues and what the work is and how do they do it. So that HR people, a lot of them are still doing the bring them in, onboard them, get them set up, rinse and repeat.
Mm-hmm.
What made this topic today so interesting, how to develop and to establish a neuro-inclusive workplace, is maybe, to Lorraine's point, when we bring people in, we should be getting to know how do they operate.
Yeah.
What's their secret sauce? What makes them blissful? And what individuates them so that we create the optimum conditions for them to thrive. And when they thrive, the company is going to enjoy more return on investment.
Mm-hmm. More loyalty, more innovation.
Can we talk about that a little bit, Kelly?
Oh, gladly. I love this part. So, because I do have a pretty big soapbox that honestly, my entire private practice is really built around this concept of foundational literacy. And to Lorraine's point, the challenge that leaders have, whether they're managers or executives, is that we don't have a society that is built on a foundational literacy of these topics. So that's point one, and I'll come back to that. The other point is, these accommodations as seen as perks. Yeah. If you actually look at your workplace and you're asking the question of how are we, our meeting, our onboarding, our whatever our practices and programs and policies are, if we ask ourselves, how could this be excluding anyone? And I think most people will say, we want to make accommodations for somebody who is cognitively different, who's autistic. I just want to know what I need to do to provide them XYZ. That's why it's seen as a perk. Because that very conversation of accommodations, like we want to give accommodations to a small cohort of people. Well, yeah, of course it's going to look like a perk to them. To the people who are getting it, it's necessary. But that shifts, that is by the very nature, that conversation is in fact exclusionary if you pull back the onion. So what I'm saying is we build a foundational literacy, understanding what are the diagnostic criteria, what are the lived and learned experiences of somebody who is dyslexic, who has sensory integration issues, who has global dyspraxia, who has autism, who has ADHD. I'm not saying our managers or our leaders need to be experts in these things, but if they have a foundational understanding of what these neurotypes are, and then they start asking themselves, okay, we're not going to see these things as perks. How are we implementing onboarding and interviewing? Is our interview process, is our onboarding process by its very nature exclusionary, meaning we only have one type of interview. It's only eyeball to eyeball. Okay, that's great, except there is an entire cohort of human beings on this planet who don't do their best work eyeball to eyeball. So can you offer interview candidates a walking interview, a shoulder to shoulder interview? Maybe if somebody is, give them a hit list of, when you're scheduling your interview, what kind of environment would you interview best in?
Stop right there. This is brilliant. A walking interview. If you are, if your neurotype is,
what difference does it make?
It is. I operate well when I'm that person. I used to operate with a headset when I was in recruitment. And my watch would log 12,000 steps. Why? Because when I was on the phone interviewing candidates, I was up and down the stairs. I was pulling laundry out of the dryer. I was doing all these things, and it worked for me. I love that.
Well, so I'm going to pause you for a second. Again, not a neuroscientist, but I want you to think about the cognitive effort that somebody who's interviewing or the candidate who is being interviewed, or example yourself while you're interviewing a candidate, the cognitive load that your brain is processing at that moment, the tone of the person's voice, you're reading their resume, right? I want you to really sit and think about what is happening in your brain and body, in the person you're interviewing, in their brain and body. That is a tremendous amount of cognitive and physical effort. So why do we walk when we talk? Why do I have fidgets all the time? Why is shoulder to shoulder interaction while you're walking? Why does that breed the most authentic conversations?
Right.
Because when we give our bodies even something small like a fidget, right? Even something like, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be tapping your fingers, it could be anything. But when you give your body something to do, your physical body, it offloads that cognitive effort so that your brain can focus where it needs to focus. Imagine, doesn't matter, neurotypical, neurodivergent, I don't care. Those are social constructs that I don't think are based in reality, my personal opinion. So if you are a human being and you are sitting in a conference room, you are already anxious, you are already nervous, you're in an unfamiliar environment with unfamiliar people, you're probably sitting in the worst interview environment, maybe a conference room that's got a fishbowl. Talk about, I mean, if you look at what's happening to that person, right? And you're saying, well, why didn't they interview well? I don't know. You just put them on display, right? So when I work with people and they say, well, we want to really, create a neuro-inclusive environment, policy, practice, workplace, I always ask them, what are you doing that could possibly be excluding others? And how can you reframe what you're doing as a practice to be more inclusionary?